And I'm Sydney.
And today we are cracking the code on how to succeed in school. Hi guys, so my name is Megan and today we are going to be doing a podcast for one of my English projects, and I decided to do it on the topic of how to succeed in school. We're going to be talking all about our top tips and tricks on how to do well in school. I put a poll on the Megan plus Madi Instagram and I asked if you guys would rather see a video on how to study or how to get good grades. And the good grades and how to study poll was about 50-50. So I decided that I would do an English project on it instead and do a podcast for you guys. I'm on the phone with my friend Sydney right now, and I chose to have her in this video because she is super smart and she is super good in school. She's super organized, so I thought it'd be good to have two different opinions. Sydney, you want to give like a little background knowledge on yourself?
Yeah, so I'm in the same grade as Megan, grade 11. And this year is going really well so far. I'm staying organized, which is nice. And I'm just really happy with how everything's been going.
Yeah, so I think the first thing that we want to talk about is all about setting goals for yourself, because I feel like if you want to do well in school, you have to have a good range on where you want to fall, like grade-wise, and like how you study and stuff like that. So I think it's pretty important that you make like a 10% grade range for each subject. That's what I do. For example, in pre-cal, if I get like between an 80 and a 90, that's a good grade for me. But in history, I want above a 90. So it really just depends on the subject, and like you might be better at some subjects or worse. So I think setting that goal really kind of gives you somewhere to start.
Yeah, I totally agree. And also, it's okay to change your goals if you start a class and it's just really hard and you're not really enjoying it. You might want to make your goal a little bit lower so you're not as disappointed. Or if you're doing really well, you can set your goals higher and go for as high as you can.
I remember in grade 9, I would set such high expectations for myself. And if I got like anything below a 95, I would get so mad at myself and beat myself up. But it really, high school really changed my opinion on grades. And honestly, if you believe you're doing well and that's a good grade for you, it doesn't matter what's a good grade for somebody else. It's going to vary person to person. So just try your best on everything you do and don't beat yourself up for the grades that you get.
Focusing on the overall grade versus individual marks, I find if you focus on your overall grade, sometimes it's definitely helpful to know where you are and to have a general idea of how you're doing in the class. But also, everything is weighted differently in the units. So you could do really well on a small comp check, but it might not boost your mark up a lot versus something bigger like a quiz or an ICA. So it's just trying to do your best on everything and see where you fall in the general scheme of your grade.
Something that Sydney and I use to help figure out what grades we get on tests or what our marks going to be after we do a test is Roger Hub grade calculator. You guys can find it. It'll be linked in the description. Just put in the percent that your test is worth and your current grade and what you got on the test, and it'll tell you your new grade. So that comes in handy a lot, especially for exams, because you just want to know where you fall, and it eliminates some of the stress after the test. Now we're going to talk about organization, because I feel like that's something that's really important in school as well. So I think my number one tip would be to get a planner, or even just like use the notes app on your phone or a calendar. And whenever your teacher says an important date or homework, you need to write it down, because then it's going to stick in your head better. And if you forget it, you can always refer back to where you wrote it down.
Yeah, a planner is definitely something that helps me a lot, keeping track of my homework and assignments coming up, just because sometimes you're so busy and you don't want to forget something and go to school the next day and realize that you haven't done it or you're not prepared for it. And actually something that I do is the bullet journal. My friend showed me last year and I absolutely loved it. And I find for me that really helps because it it takes time and energy to create the layout or whatever, however you set it up personally. And I find it motivates me to actually use it. So it's just varies depending on how you study or how you organize yourself. But I think a planner or a checklist is definitely something that can help anyone.
Yeah, I definitely agree to try bullet journaling if you're someone creative like Sydney. It definitely depends on the type of person, but try it out because I did and it's a lot of fun. And I also think it's important to have a system to organize each of your subjects. So what I do is I have a notebook and a duotang for each subject. So any papers that my teachers give me or tests that I get back or projects, I'll put in the duotang. But any notes or homework I do will be in the scribbler. And I also divide my scribbler in half. So the front half is for notes and the back half is for homework.
I do the same thing actually. I keep my notes completely separate from my work just because sometimes it's kind of a hassle to flip back and forth in between. And I think keeping things separate is just another way of staying organized and making sure you have all your notes in one place and they're not just shoved in a binder or a pocket folder.
And it's all about finding a system that works for you. I know a lot of people use like binders and have a divider for each subject. And some people just have duotangs or just have notebooks. So just try different things and figure out what works for you. All right, so next we're going to talk about time management, another key thing in succeeding in school. And this is something that I actually struggle with quite a bit, but I've been working to get better, and Sydney here is actually super good at it. So what's your opinion on time management?
Yeah, so I'm definitely really busy outside of school, but I think it's important to have other commitments and things that you enjoy and that you have fun doing, just to take a break from the stress of school and other things you have going on in your life. But it's also important to prioritize what you need to do and what's really important for the next day or that day even. So one of my rules that I like to do and try my best to do is calling it quits at 12, because it's actually scientifically proven that you get your best sleep before midnight. And especially at our age, we might not realize it, but our bodies are still growing and developing. And it's really important that you're staying healthy physically and mentally. I mean, if you have a test the next day and you just had no time to study, I definitely think you should study for the test. But if you have homework and you've been up all day and you're so exhausted, it's almost better to go to bed with a fresh mind for the next day instead of being grumpy and not doing your best with the homework or test or studying.
Yeah, that's a really good tip that Sydney taught me, and I definitely use it quite a bit. And another thing, so say you're up all night and you do the call it quits at 12, and you still have some homework in the morning that you have to do for one of your morning classes. Do it on the way to school. Do it, unless you're driving yourself. If your parents drive you, do it in the car on the way there, or do it on the bus. If you don't get car sick, that's something that I do a lot because it gives me like an extra 10-15 minutes to do that homework. What is your opinion on taking breaks?
Taking breaks is definitely something that I struggle with. I either don't take enough or I take too many and the breaks are too long. But it's definitely important to take breaks. You don't want your mind to be so exhausted, and you want to put as much effort into your homework and you want to have it show that you've done a good job. I think taking small breaks, maybe 10 minutes every 45 minutes or something like that, whatever schedule and time frame works for you.
Yeah, I think that's a really good tip, and to take short breaks, but make sure they're not too long and then you don't have time to do your homework. So now we're going to talk about homework and studying, because I feel like I get a lot of questions and a lot of students wonder about this stuff. So my number one tip out of this whole podcast would be to do your homework. It is so important. I guarantee you will notice a difference in your grades and how you're keeping up in school, because it just makes sure that you understand what you're learning, and there's less of a chance that you'll end up cramming for the test the night before.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that, especially for people who maybe struggle or aren't happy with the grade that they're at. Doing your homework, or even if you're not assigned any homework, doing extra practice, or even just reviewing your notes or going above and beyond to know the material, you're going to see the difference and you're going to see the results. You're going to be much more happy with your grade, and you're just going to be more motivated to do well and to continue to do well.
And I also think that the first step in getting a good grade is to make sure that you understand what you're learning in class before you leave. I struggle with this a little bit because sometimes I'm just nervous to ask the teacher. But please, please, please ask the teacher if you have questions and you don't understand what you're learning before you leave class. That way you understand when you get home and you're not all confused at your house trying to figure out the homework.
Another strategy that actually I've been trying to implement when I'm doing my homework is if I'm doing my homework and I have a question or I'm stuck with something, I attempt it, but then if I can't get it, I'll just make a little note on the side and write my question, because if they do homework check the next day, the teacher knows that you attempted it, so you don't forget your question and they can go over it with you, because most times if you have a question, other people in the class have the same question.
When you get in class, definitely let your teacher know, because a lot of teachers like go over homework in class the next day. And it's important not to spend too much time on your homework, and don't let it take over your life. You don't want to spend an hour on one math question because you're probably going to be pretty frustrated afterward as well. How do you think the best way to study is?
I like to make a checklist of the things that are going to be on the test or quiz, and then I can do practice questions, and as I understand the material, I can check off what I know and check off or make a note of what I need to work on or practice more. Just that way you know what you're good at, but you also know what you need to spend a little more time on.
I think it's really important to focus on practice problems more than taking notes. This is definitely something I've learned over the years, because I used to study and I would make a huge unit review notes package, and it would take me 3 hours, and then I wouldn't have time to practice the problems. But if you're being tested on something like in the math or science where it's all applying your knowledge to different questions, you need to focus on practicing more than notes. I definitely think it's important to make a cheat sheet and put down your key information that you need to remember. But I don't think it's worth your time to spend hours on making notes.
Something that I've been told in the past is that your brain likes to know that it's doing well. So what I mean by that is, if you're studying a subject like biology or English terms where it's more memorization, don't go over the terms that you already know just to make yourself feel like you know the material. You have to practice the things that you don't know rather than spend time practicing the thing that you're best at.
I think another really helpful tip is to make flashcards. And if you don't want to make flashcards, actually use the little cue cards, you can use this app called Quizlet. I use this all the time. It is so much fun and so helpful. It pretty much tricks your brain into you thinking you're playing on your phone, but you're actually studying. So basically, Quizlet is a flashcard app where you put things in that you need to know, like a definition and a term, and then it will organize the terms and put them in a way that you will learn. Totally try it out. I will have it linked in the description, and you can just search it up. It's a free app, and I use this all the time because it's just so convenient, and I can play it on my phone. So if I'm not at home with my books, I can still study on the go.
So another thing that could really help you is watching YouTube videos or other videos that you find online. Sometimes hearing things in a different voice might click better, and it might help you understand the material.
If you need help with chemistry, I would totally recommend Tyler DeWitt. I will have him linked down below, but last year I was really struggling with chemistry, and he totally changed the way that I learned that, and I did a lot better afterward. He has so many videos, and he's amazing. And also for biology, I would recommend watching Amoeba Sisters. They make really little funny cartoons, and they're so helpful, so cute, and I love their videos as well. And I also watch TED Ed and Khan Academy. So our last category that we're going to be talking about in this podcast is actually when we take the test. I want to know what you think on what your best strategy to do is if you blank or you don't know something on a test.
Yeah, so a strategy that I use and I think will work for a lot of people is doing the questions that you know the answers to or you know how to attempt them first, and then saving time at the end of the test or a quiz to go back at the end and reattempt the questions that you were unsure about or didn't know.
Yeah, I think it's really important to kind of time manage on your test because it takes me a long time to do tests, and I'm definitely one of the last people to finish every single time. I always do the long answer questions first, like in math. I'll save the multiple choice for the end because if I end up running out of time, I will just guess on them, and then at least I have a 25% chance of getting right instead of missing out on 5 points of a long answer. And I also think it's important that you set time goals for each question. So whenever I'm writing a test, I'll be on question 1 and I'll be like, okay, Megan, you're going to try to get this question done in 5 minutes. And then I kind of race myself against my watch and I'll keep an eye on my watch. And then when the 5 minutes is over, I move on to the next question.
Yeah, and definitely knowing what speed you are when you take tests is something that comes with experience for different subjects. Like sometimes if you're really strong in math, it might take you not a lot of time to write the math test. But if you struggle in a subject such as biology or even chemistry or anything, it might take you longer. So it's just figuring out where you're at in the unit and where you're at in the class.
Another thing that I want to talk about this is a tip that I haven't really shared with many people, but it helps me so much, and I feel like a lot of people don't know about it, so this is like a top secret tip. Before I take my test, like up to the minute before the teacher hands out the papers, I'm like on my review sheet and I'm like reading over information. If you think that there's some sort of formula or like key piece of information that you're going to forget, start repeating it in your head and then put away your notebook. And when the teacher puts your test on your desk and you don't have your notes in front of you, so you're just taking the test, before you even start the test, before you even write your name on the paper, write that key piece of information on the top of your test. Then if you forget it in the middle of your test, you can go back to the top of your paper and you're like, hey, I didn't forget that. I use that tip so often, and it saves me so many points here and there. So I totally recommend trying that.
Yeah, and actually a tip that I heard some people talking about last year or the year before was writing in red pen. And I've actually found that helps a lot for me, I guess just because of the color red, and typically you're not writing your notes or doing your homework in red pen. So what I like to do is take a sheet of loose leaf or 2 sheets, however many I need, and write the key pieces of information for that test or that quiz on the sheet of paper and red pen, and I find it helps me memorize it and it helps me retain the information better.
I actually never knew about that tip, but that is definitely something that I'll be trying in the future. The last thing that we're going to talk about is how we deal with stress before and while writing a test. So when I write a test, I usually either have one of 2 things in my mouth, either gum or coffee. And I usually have coffee because if I'm really tired from studying the day before, coffee kind of gives me that extra boost of energy and it keeps me awake and alert during the test. That way I don't like fall asleep and miss little things on my test, and I like misread a question or lose points here and there because I forgot a negative sign. Gum relieves stress for me. I think it's because it's sort of like a stress ball in your mouth. That's kind of a weird way to put it, but whenever I chew gum, I definitely feel more relaxed and it gives me like a minty sensation. So it's kind of like a good, happy feeling while I'm writing the test. So those are just 2 tips that I recommend to do if you're dealing with stress. Alright, so that pretty much concludes our entire podcast on cracking the code on how to succeed in school. So we've spilled all the tea about how to succeed and we've given you all of our tips and tricks. And thank you so much for watching. You can find my YouTube at Megan and Madi, what you're watching right now, and also Instagram, Megan plus Madi. we wish you guys the best luck in all of your studies. And I gotta go because I got a pre-cal test tomorrow, so I'm gonna study. Bye, guys.